So simple stress and strain, first chapter. So it is the biggest chapter and having many multiple concepts in this, and it's having highest weightage as well. Okay, so there's a very high probability that you will be getting a question in the coming GATE examination from this chapter. Kindly listen carefully. Okay, so in this chapter we start from your 11th class level, or from the concept where that means from stress strain diagram which you have studied in your 11th class or 12th class. So from that level we'll start and slowly we go on building up the concept. Understood? Clear? So listen properly. So if you are giving 100% concentration here, then definitely you are going to get the clear understanding about the concept. You will not be missing anything. Clear? Okay. So let's start with the first definition. The slide is just the sections names to give you an idea. So first section is simple stress and strains. We're going to discuss few basic concepts in this. Then we'll study about elastic constants and their relationships. Then we'll study about linear and volumetric changes. And at last, we're going to study about thermal stresses. So these are the 4 sections. You don't need to copy that. That's completely okay. So let's go ahead with the first and very important definition, that is stress. So immediately once you hear about the definition of stress, or you want to give definition of stress, the thing which comes to your mind is force by area. Okay, so many people think definition for stress is force by area. So all you have to do is just go ahead into the question, where is the force value, where is the area value, and divide both one upon each other, you get the value of stress, which is not correct every time. It's not correct every time. Okay, so I'll explain you here. Look, you take a cylindrical rod like this. On this cylindrical rod, if you apply a force P, only force P here, and there is no force at this location, and this is the area of cross section. Okay, in this case, you cannot say stress is equal to simply P by A. The answer stress is equal to sigma is equal to P by A for this condition. So there is P both sides, and you are giving or keeping the body in equilibrium, or net force is equal to 0. So in this case, you can say sigma is equal to P by A, but actually strictly speaking, sigma is actually given by R by A. So what is R? So what is R? R is given by, or R is called as the internal resistive force produced inside the material. The internal resistive force produced inside the material. So what you are doing here, you are taking a rod or something, let's assume it's an eraser or some elastic rubber. So you are applying a force in this direction. So P in this direction, P in this direction. Okay, so those two forces are giving rise to internal resistive force inside the material. Or in a correct way, the material, due to the application or experiencing, due to the experience of force, that will be giving rise to this internal resistive force R. So stress is actually given by this R by area of cross section. So your R should be there to give the value of stress. So in this case, since R is equal to P, I should write down as R is equal to P here because the body is in equilibrium. So this implies stresses can be written as P by area of cross section. But here, again, sigma is equal to R by A. But here you cannot say, so you cannot say that some R value is there. You cannot say some R value is there. So R value is equal to 0 here. So when you apply a force in this way, in this fashion, this will not be giving rise to any stress, because it will not be, the material will not experience any internal resistive force. Internal resistive force will be produced in this case. So that's why in this case the correct answer is equal to, the correct answer for stress will be equal to 0. Understood? Clear? So if you compare these two, the huge difference, the main crucial difference between these two cases is, in this case you have net force non-zero. In this case you have net force as 0 here. So we can give the property name as equilibrium. So the partial definition of equilibrium is net force should be 0. The complete definition of equilibrium is net force and net moment should be equal to 0. I hope you guys have studied about concept of equilibrium in the subject of engineering mechanics. If it not studied also, not a problem. I'm going to explain it once again. So net force should be 0. So you can understand that hence the body should be in equilibrium The body should be in equilibrium. The body should be in equilibrium to experience stress. The body should be in equilibrium to experience stress. This is the mandatory condition here. Understood? So you can think about a situation where there is force like this. So here there is 10 Newton and here there is 5 Newton. So here you can say that the body is not in equilibrium. Okay, but this will cause stress. The reason is here 5 Newton force is being cancelled out. It is not in equilibrium due to the not cancelled force. Understand? So there is remaining 5 Newton, or let's keep it as 6 Newton here. So stress is produced due to 6 Newton force. So the stress is produced due to 6 Newton force. It is not in equilibrium due to 4 Newton force. So as 6 Newton force is being cancelled out and keeping the body in equilibrium, or at least that part of the force is being cancelled out. So we can say that this member will experience stress. So this case we call, so actually stress comes out to be 6 Newton by area of cross section. So this we call it as partial equilibrium case. But in our subject of SOM, we will not be dealing with these partial equilibrium cases. We will be dealing with only, these complete equilibrium cases. Okay, so we will not be having any confusion at all. So just given this to give you a clarity. So the necessary condition for the material to experience stress is it should be in equilibrium. And you copy this. So the definition of stress I am writing down here. Okay. So normal stress and shear stress. So they are very easy to understand. If a force is acting perpendicular to area of cross section, we say the stress produced inside the material is normal stress. If the force is acting parallel to area of cross section, we say the stress is called as shear stress. Okay. So it should be very clear. It should be very clear whether the stress produced due to a applied force is actually a normal stress or shear stress. Because the way the material behaves for a normal stress will be completely different with respect to shear stress. Okay. So you can copy that. I'm just putting a simple diagram to understand the difference between normal stress and shear stress. So this is the same force on same area of cross section. So here we'll be having normal stress sigma as P by A. So here we'll be having same P by A as shear stress. Okay. So after this we'll go with the next definition, that is definition of strain. Okay. So strain definition is very simple. So ratio of change of dimensions to original dimensions. Okay, so you just find out the change of dimensions and divide by original dimensions. So linear strain means change of linear dimensions. Okay, so it's the first type of strain. So linear strain. The next one is volumetric strain. So in linear strain we are concerned about linear dimensions, and in volumetric strain we are concerned about volumetric changes. Okay, clear? So here we are concerned about change in length, change in breadth, change in height. So these are all linear strains. So volumetric strain, so change in volume by original volume. So normal strain means, the next definition, strain produced due to normal stress. Shear strain means strain produced due to shear stress. That's all. Okay. So these are all simple definitions. After this we'll be going ahead with the new concepts which you haven't heard before. So you can see the picture. So gamma is actually given by delta x by L. Okay, so this gamma is very, very small. Okay, so actually should take gamma. So this is given as gamma here. So we actually should take it as tan gamma is equal to delta x by L. Okay, so gamma is very less. Hence we can write down gamma is equal to delta x by L. Understood? So that's how we have to get the answer for that. Okay, listen carefully now. So till now we have seen very basic definitions and all. So the main definition which you should be understanding was definition of stress, which most people will not be having the clear idea. So remaining definitions were you are already familiar with of. You are already familiar of those remaining definitions. Now we are going ahead, one step ahead to understand about definition of stress and strain. So I am taking a cylindrical rod which was having some original area of cross section as A naught and original length as L naught. So it is having original area as A naught and original length is equal to L naught. So on this one I am applying a load P. So the body is in equilibrium, so it will be experiencing stress, and due to the application of force P, the member is experiencing elongation, and its final length is L1 and final area is equal to A1. Okay, I advise or I suggest the people who are listening this lecture for the first time to answer. If you already know the answer, kindly just don't tell. So let's make other people, new people, to think and approach for the correct answer. Okay, so if I ask you for stress sigma, your answer will be P by A naught or P by A1. Which one will be your answer for stress? Normal stress, I mean. So the correct answer, the strict correct answer for stress is actually P by A1. Okay, because A naught is anyways there initially. Whether load P is there or load P is not there, A naught is already there. So there is no, relatively speaking, the correct way of experiencing or showing the stress value is P by A1. Because A1 is produced due to P. If P is not there, A1 is not there. So correct stress due to the application of force P is given by P by A1. But in real scenario, finding out instantaneous dimensions, that is A1, L1, is very difficult. Sometimes dangerous also. So for example, if you remember your universal testing machine experiments, there will be extensometer which will be measuring the value of delta L. From there you can get the value of L naught. There is a dial gauge which can help you to get the value of load, whatever you are applying there. But you are not advised to go to the setup and measure instantaneous area for every instant when the loading was going on. I'll repeat my statement. When your loading is going on, you are not advised to go towards the setup or the workpiece and check the value of instantaneous area, which is completely wrong, or it's not advisable because it's very dangerous. All of a sudden, if the workpiece breaks and comes and hits your face, means it's going to be very, very dangerous. Yeah. So you're not advised to get the value or calculate the value of, measure the value of A1. Understand? So you are left over with the problem that you cannot get the value of stress as P by A1. Understand? Clear? That's the reason why we take P by A naught. Understood? So P by A1 name is given as conventional stress, and this is given the name as true stress. So this is given the name as conventional stress and this is given the name as true stress. Okay. I also see the screen is completely white here. Okay. Just a minute, I'll just get it resolved. Okay, so I hope the technical issue is resolved now. So we are discussing about this conventional stress and conventional strain. If you take initial dimensions, you will be getting conventional stress. If you take instantaneous dimensions, you will be getting true stress or true strain. I mean, if you are calculating strains, you will be getting corresponding strains. Now, actually speaking, we just now realized that the accurate value is true stress rather than, or true stress or true strain rather than conventional values of stress and strain. But there is a limitation. Every time you cannot calculate or you cannot measure instantaneous dimensions very easily in real life scenario. So many times you will face problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to use conventional values only in those cases. Clear? But we are going to derive some numerical formulae which will help us to give us the value of true stress or true strain if we know conventional values of stress and strain. Because conventional values are very easy to get because they are depending upon original dimensions only. So we can calculate the value of conventional stress and conventional strain. So using those values, you should be able to get the value of true stress or true strain if you know the formula. So let's derive them, and that formula is not for every type of material. So we are going to derive for some exceptional types of materials like incompressible materials. I hope you people are familiar with an incompressible material. An incompressible material means the material which doesn't change its density no matter whatever is the value of force or pressure or stress is acted upon that. Clear? So we are going with that type of material here. So let's derive that equation. Let's derive those equations which can help us to get the values of true stress and true strains when we would like to get the value of true stress and true strain using conventional values of stress and strain. Clear? Okay. Kindly copy till here. So I'm going with the condition that the member is in compressible material. If it is incompressible material, density will remain constant before application of load and after application of load. If density and mass are constant, we can expect volume also to remain constant. Okay, so mass is equal to constant. Since volume is equal to constant, since mass is equal to constant. So volume is constant means A0 L0 value is equal to A1 L1. This gives us L0 by L1 is equal to A1 by A0. So we'll use this result to get the value of true stress and true strain. Understand? So we are going to use this application. So we should understand that the formula whichever we are deriving are valid for only incompressible materials. Understood? Now let's see the formula for conventional stress or engineering stress. So it is very simple. Force by original area of cross section. You should keep in mind that we know original area, we know original length, and we know change of length, and we know the value of force P. So these are known values. Remaining all are unknown values. Clear? So we know original dimensions, we know change of length because in simple tension we'll be using extensometer to get the value of change of length, and applied load P is there. So P is known, A0 is known, so you can get the value of conventional stress. Now conventional strain is simply given as change in length by original length. You know the value of change in length, you know the value of original length, so you can get the answer. Understand? So now this can be actually written as final length minus original length by original length. So strain comes out to be L1 by L0 minus 1. So implies we can say that L1 by L0 value is nothing but 1 plus epsilon. So we have derived just now that L1 by L0 value is equal to 1 plus epsilon. So you can write down that it is nothing but A0 by A1. It's nothing but A0 by A1. L1 by L0 value is equal to 1 plus epsilon, which is nothing but A0 by A1. Let's use that condition here. Now if you go with third condition, so we have a third one, that is nothing but our true stress, the main thing here. So true stress, correctly speaking, it is according to the formula P by A1. But we don't know what is the value of A1, right? So what we do is, we'll write down in this way as P by A0 into A0 by A1. So P by A0 into A0 by A1. So P by A0 is actually nothing but conventional stress sigma, and A0 by A1 just now we have derived it as 1 plus epsilon. So if you know conventional stress sigma and conventional strain sigma, conventional stress sigma and conventional strain epsilon, we can get the value of true stress for an incompressible material just by using this equation. So we can get the value of true stress. Understand? Clear? So for an incompressible material we can use this formula. But if it is not incompressible or it's a compressible material, so generally every metal on earth is compressible, so you're going to understand in a more clear way later. So we cannot apply that formula for those materials. Okay, so coming to the true strain. So for true strain, we have the formula dl by L integral L0 to L1. So true strain formula is equal to given by dl by L integral L0 to L1. Okay, so this is the formula here. If you do the integration, log of L from L0 to L1. So ln of L1 by L0 is the value of the formula, or is the formula for that. So L1 by L0 is nothing but 1 plus epsilon. So this gives you true strain value as log of 1 plus epsilon, where epsilon is conventional strain. So if you know true stress, if you know conventional stress and conventional strain, for an incompressible material, we can easily get the value of true stress and true strain. So many times in GATE question, we got in GATE examination, we got questions from the formula of true stress and true strain. So you can use this formula. Clear? Sometimes they don't say strictly that it's incompressible material, but in a default way, we should assume that will be incompressible material and we should get the answer. Clear? Okay, everyone, you can copy this and you can start solving the question, which was asked in GATE 2016 paper, and the same question was asked by changing its sentence in GATE 2018 paper. Okay, so kindly copy that. So we'll go ahead. So in this question, it's given that the value of true strain produced in compressing a cylinder to half its original length is. So cylinder original length is L. Let's take it. Final length, let's take it as L by 2. Okay, so the value of true strain. So just now we have seen the formula for true strain is ln of final length by original length, or it can also be written as 1 plus epsilon. One way of solving is using these two values, get the value of epsilon and substituting in this formula. Okay. Other way is just using this formula, using these values and directly putting in this formula. Okay. So if you're going by this approach, it is long. You're going to invest more amount of time. You should not have that attitude of going with lengthy method. How little lengthy it may be. Clear? So you should go with this formula. Immediately should pop up. This formula should pop up in your mind. Once you see these length values, you should use this formula to get the answer. So here, if you substitute, final length is L by 2, original length is L. So this gives you ln of 1 by 2. This comes out to be minus of ln of 0.2, ln of 2, so 0.69. So this negative sign is very important. Understand? In 2018 paper, the same question came in this way. A bar of having some length L is compressed to half its length. What is the magnitude of true strain? That's what they asked. So if you read that statement properly, they are expecting you to give the magnitude of true strain. And it's a numerical answer type question. So there, in that blank, you should be entering 0.69 because they're concerned about only magnitude. Clear? So the magnitude of true strain is 0.69. So reading the question is very, very important. And you should be giving in that respect to units or respect to values. So though they are saying it as magnitude, they're expecting you to give the magnitude, but you have entered as minus 0.69. The answer is gone. You will not be getting marks at all for the question. Clear? So you should read the question properly. Clear? Let's go ahead. So let's understand the stress strain curves. We're going to study about 4 stress strain curves, and these stress strain curves will give us an idea about what is ductile material, what is a brittle material in a very clear way. Can you copy this? Okay. So we are going with this first stress strain diagram. So we have to study 4 stress strain diagrams. So first one is stress strain diagram for ductile materials under tension. Second one is brittle materials under tension. Third one is ductile under shear. And fourth one is brittle under shear. So first 2 are regarding tensile loading, and last 2 are regarding shear loading. So we are going to study the first one, that is ductile material under tension. So if you see here, to draw this diagram, we actually use universal testing machine, and we apply a load which will be giving rise to stress. So in this experiment, the setup will be helpful for you to get the value of load and elongation. So you'll be measuring load and elongation. So if you remember, a big dial gauge is there beside the universal testing machine, which will be giving you the value of the applied load. And beside the workpiece, you'll be having extensometer, which will be helping us to give you the value of change of length. So using these values, you will be getting the corresponding stress and corresponding strain. So load divided by original area gives you conventional stress or corresponding stress, and change in length divided by original length gives you the value of strain. So we are actually plotting the conventional stress and conventional strain here. So listen properly, everyone. Strain, stress. So both are conventional values. So please remember, this is P by A naught and this is delta L by L naught. So we measure or take the reading of load and elongation and divide by area and original length respectively to get the value of conventional stress and conventional strain. Okay, so you can draw the same graph for load and elongation as well. Okay, So we are drawing in terms of stress and strain because that will be more helpful in getting many details and many good amount of information regarding those applications of regarding those huge amount of information regarding that material and also its behavior. So when you apply the load, so you have to apply the load very slowly and you should increase the value very slowly. So that's the reason why a technician was employed to increase the value very slowly using the dial gauge. So if you are increasing the load very fastly, then the internal resistive force produced inside the material will not be equal to applied force. So we should increase the value of P very slowly, so that we are giving sufficient amount of time for the material to produce internal resistive force, and our stress value is equal to P by A, which is equal to internal resistive force. If you are increasing the load very fast, then R will not be equal to P, and your value of stress, whatever you are calculating, that is applied load by area, will not be correct. In fact, we are going to study about the cases where R is not equal to P in the chapter 9. So maybe in the last lecture, we'll be studying about the cases where R is not equal to P. Except that case, so throughout the whole subject, we are always going to deal with the cases where R is equal to P. So R is equal to P, sigma is equal to R by A. So R is equal to P, so you can say sigma is equal to P by A. And please remember, we are drawing the graph between conventional stress and conventional strain. That's why here there is A naught and here there is L naughts. Okay. So if you increase the value of stress, what happens is the stress strain will be proportional to each other for some amount of strain. That means if you are, anyways, here what you are doing is, you are going to increase the value of load here. So the load will be giving rise to stress and that stress will be giving rise to strain. Understand? Clear? So if you are doubling the value of load, automatically stress also will be doubled here. So correspondingly, strain also will be doubled here. If you are tripling the value of stress, if you are tripling the value of load, you will be giving rise to triple value of, or you will be giving rise to tripling the value of, tripling of this strain value here. Understood? Clear? So this is how the material is behaving up to some point. So if stress is doubled, strain is doubled. If stress is tripled, strain is also getting tripled, means we are talking about linear behavior. So linear behavior here. So that is up to some point. Okay. So we call this limit as proportionality limit, as shown in the diagram. So point A is the proportionality limit. And another very important thing which we observe in this region is the material will be elastic in nature. So the material will be elastic in nature means if you release the load from any point after increasing the load to this point, and if you release it all of a sudden, so the material will take the same path and come here. So coming to here means it is origin, zero stress, zero elongation or zero strain. That means there will be no change of dimensions. That means it will be regaining its original shape and dimensions. So this is a behavior which you observe till this first point, which is proportionality limit. After proportionality limit, you will miss this linear behavior, but you will have this elastic behavior. That's why the region up to this point B is given the name as elastic region. So this is elastic region and this is linear region. So this linear region is completely inside the elastic region. So point A is proportionality limit and point B is elastic limit. So the material's elastic behavior is till point B. Kindly remember. Understood? And please listen carefully here. So this is the very big doubt many people are having everywhere. And still now there is no clarity regarding this. So I would like to give you a very much good clarity here. So please listen carefully here. There is a huge debate, if you search internet also, whether stress is dependent or that means stress causes strain or strain causes stress. So there is a huge debate. So stress is independent or strain is independent. So which one is input, which one is output? So many people debate that stress is input, strain is output. So many people also debate that strain is input and stress is input, stress is output. Okay, so here I would like to tell you clearly here, the correct thing is stress is input, strain is output. Independent, dependent. So many people debate that we draw the stress strain curve, stress in y direction, strain in x direction. In x direction we keep independent variables or inputs Okay, so strain is independent or strain is independent of the debate, but actually it is not true. So we draw the stress strain curve in this way, where independent variable is kept in this y direction and dependent variable or output is kept in this direction only for our convenience. Because this graph gives us clear understanding of Young's modulus, clear understanding of resilience, toughness, many properties of the material. So this is a best curve. That means if the curve is drawn between, that means curve is drawn keeping sigma in this direction and strain in this direction, then only we will be getting those values very easily. If you are reversing it, we'll get the curve, but that curve will not be that much helpful for us to give the correct answer very easily. Understood? That always causes confusion. That's the reason why it is given like this, and why I am very confident in telling you that. Why I am very confident in telling you that. Manoj, please kindly listen carefully. Why I am telling you very much confidently in telling that stress is independent and strain is dependent. That means strain is produced due to stress. Because if you take a case where the member is given like this and it is thermally heated or temperature is increased. So in this case, internal resistive force will be equal to 0. So if you heat it, stress will be equal to 0. But you will be giving rise to strain that is given as alpha delta T. So in this case here, if your statement strain is the input, stress is the output is true, then here we see that as you go on increasing the value of temperature, strain will be going on increasing. But whatever the value of strain is there, your stress value is always equal to 0. Stress is independent of strain. So this is one of the best example which can clear the confusion, which one is dependent, which one is independent. Understood? So Manoj and Ray, I hope it is clear. If you have given the statement that it depends upon the material. So I would also like to know if I am missing anything. So you can put your statement if you have read anywhere or have gone to any textbook or explained any by any faculty or anywhere, you can let me know so that I can do my background work as well and understand if anything is wrong or is it really depending upon the type of the metal as well. Understood? Clear? So strain depends upon the material there, because strain again depends upon Young's modulus. That will be coming to that. But if you're talking about stress, so stress is independent of material. Okay, so all you have to do is keep the condition of equilibrium, apply the value of load, divide by area of cross section. That's it. Clear? Understood? So stress is independent, strain is dependent. Stress is the input, strain is output. Kindly keep in mind, understand? So if in any interview, if anybody asks you, just give this example that clears up all the discussion. If you are stuck with any debate anywhere, you can put this example that concludes or that closes the discussion there itself. Understood? So if they can anyone say the answer for this, okay, so that why stress is being independent of strain, then only their statement is correct. Okay, but here we are already observing that whatever be the value of strain, stress is always 0 here. Stress is never affected by strain. Strain is affected by stress there. We're going to discuss regarding that thing as well. Clear? Understood? Okay, so this is the way the metal is behaving up to point B. So we have observed that elastic behavior is there. If you release the load up to point B from anywhere, it will take the same path and reaches this original location. Understand? Okay. Now if you are increasing the value of load slowly and going beyond the value of stress, that means going beyond the value of stress beyond point B, then you will experience the plastic behavior. So you will start experiencing plastic behavior. The metal starts experiencing or start behaving plastically or deforming plastically. So this whole region is actually, strictly speaking, plastic region. So plastic is opposite of elastic. So in elastic region, if you release the load, it will regain its original shape and dimensions. Plastic means once you release the load, it will not regain its original shape and dimensions. Understood? You want the text? Fine, I'll just write down here, you can copy meanwhile. Manoj and Ray, you can copy from there. Once you guys are copied, once you are done copying, please let me know. I'll go ahead with the remaining part of explanation of this stress strain curve. If you are applying the load and going beyond point C, if you are applying the load and going beyond point C, you will observe the plastic region starts and the material will have or behaving plastically. So if you release load any point beyond C, from any point beyond C, then this will take a path like this. So till point B, if you are releasing means it is taking the same path and coming back, right? But if you release beyond C, it will take a path like this. So this will be the slope. The slope is given by Young's modulus, which we're going to see it later. Understand? So this will take the same path like this. Understand? But it is similar path. I mean, this slope of the line is same. Okay? Okay? So this is how the material comes back to the original shape and dimensions. So we see that once it comes here, there is some, I don't mean that it exactly comes to point B. So I don't want to create that misconception. So I'm redrawing the diagram again here. So if you release from point B, if I release from any point after C, it will take the path like this, where the slope is equal to Young's modulus. Understand? Clear? So we see that when you're releasing from this point, this amount of strain was there. But from this amount of strain, this amount got recovered. So this amount of permanent strain will be there. Okay? So you will never reach the point of origin where there is zero strain, zero stress. Understood? So from here, it decreases the value of stress. Okay? Not stress, the strain value here, and you'll be having some non-zero value here. So this is how the material is behaving. And other very important thing which you observe here is, in this plastic region, you see that we are giving rise to change of strain, but here change of stress is equal to 0. That means we are not required to increase the value of load. We don't need to increase the value of stress. Using same value of stress, we are able to give rise to change of strain. That's what the initial behavior in the plastic region. Understand? So it goes on like that, but the material will not be behaving in that way. Forever, the material didn't expect, that means forever the material cannot behave in such a way that strain should be non-zero, but stress should always be equal to, change of stress always should be equal to 0. What happens is, after some time, the material will become stiffer. Okay? So the material will become stiffer and you will get a curve like this. In this curve, what happens is, you will have delta x epsilon not equal to 0 when you have delta sigma not equal to 0. If delta sigma is not equal to 0, you cannot have change of strain. Understand? For example, imagine like this. You are doing forging operation. Listen carefully here. Visualization is very important. Imagine you are doing forging operation. So some block of rod is there and you are going on hitting it. So you are hitting with same force, same area. Stress is same. So let's assume for some time you are hitting with same value of stress. That means stress value is constant. You are not increasing the value of stress. So though you are keeping same value of stress, that will give rise to elongation of the bar. As you are going on increasing the value of stress, as you are going on applying the same value of stress, elongation will be going on being produced. So strain is going on increasing there. But after some time, if you are continuing in the same way, that will not help you to give you the value of the same value of change of strain. So if you are maintaining the same way, the strain will not be produced in the same way. So you have to increase the value of stress to make it to elongate more or produce the same value of strain. Understand? Or imagine this way here. Imagine you are taking some ball of wheat flour to make a roti. Okay? So let's assume you are going to make a roti. Understand? So when you are initially using a rod, this roll you are using to spread that. You are applying same force and just doing like this. It is spreading. But after spreading for a good amount of length, you have to apply some effort to produce more value of strain. Understood? So the effort region is in this region. You have to increase the value of stress. Where you are not applying any effort is this region. I hope it is at least a little bit clear. The example may be a little bit difficult to imagine, clear, but I hope you people have understood that in this region, initial stage of plastic region, strict plastic region, where in this region you don't need to increase the value of stress. With constant value of load or stress, you'll be able to give or cause increase the value of strain. But once it goes beyond this point is given as D, so we are forced to increase the value of stress, then only it is possible. Clear? And this region, out of this plastic region from here, is given the name as strain hardening region. This region is called as strain hardening region. So this point goes to a peak like this, but you can observe that experimentally the curve comes to down before it experiences fraction, or the member experiences fraction. So in this region, so from here to here it is called as strain hardening region. Till here it is called as strain hardening region. In this region, the material undergoes huge amount of decrease of area. The material undergoes huge amount of decrease of area. So it becomes like this. Area decreases to a very greater extent. So this region we call it as necking region. So after strain hardening region, we'll get necking region. So we understand that the fracture happens at point F. So we just observed experimentally that the curve goes to a peak and comes down like this. So all these whatever we have drawn are experimental observations. So we observed at the start of plastic region, there is no requirement, that means there is no requirement of increasing the value of load or stress. I mean both, because if you don't increase the value of load, it itself gives you the value of stress. Okay. So but in strain hardening region, we have to increase the value of stress, otherwise it's not going to be possible. So the curve will go to a peak, but afterwards you will observe that the curve comes to downward point and fracture happens. This is what we have observed here. Okay. And one important thing which you have to keep in mind is, from this point to C till end, this behavior will be there. So whether you do in this plastic region, that means complete region, we can call it as plastic region, but strictly speaking, many books say that only this region is plastic region. That's why I given in that way in the diagram as well, from C to D. So remaining region, this is called as strain hardening region from D to E, and remaining E to F is called as necking region. So whether you take plastic region C to D or D to E or E to F, so if you are giving rise to, or if you are releasing the load, what happens, it will take the same path like this. So from C to F, if you release the load, it will regain its some amount of horizontal dimensions. That means it comes to this one. That means permanent strain will be there. Some amount of strain value will be recovered. Understood? Okay? But please listen carefully here, because we got a question in GATE 2019 paper based upon this itself. Once you unload after point C and again load it, let's assume from here again you are loading it, or any point after C. So if you again load it, you will experience yield point little bit slightly higher than this. So yield point, this will become C dash. So yield point got increased. So you have increased the value of yield point. So that's the way the metal is behaving. So yield point is very important for ductile materials. So we're gonna take that as strength of the material. Later we're gonna see why we take that as strength of the material. So we are increasing the strength of the material. That's the reason why materials are made to undergo plastic deformation or forming operations like rolling, forging, etc. before actual application of the load or actual application of or actual usage in real life scenario. Understood? So because if you are loading up to plastic region and unloading, its strength is increasing. That's very much used in many applications, because that causes huge changes. So it will be nullifying huge amount of blowholes, whatever the defects are there, to a maximum extent, and increases the value of strength. That's how the metal experiences. That's how the metal is behaving. Ductile metal is behaving under the application of loads. What about upper and lower yield points? Yeah, Manoj Chandra, very good points. Very good question. So few materials show little bit multiple values of yield points. The best example is mild steel. So mild steel, due to the presence of multiple elements, wherever you see there are elements. Element means, from chemistry concepts, element means aluminum is an element, carbon is an element, iron is an element. So if you have more than one element in the microstructure or lattice positions, you will have you can observe, you will have a situation where you can observe these multiple yield points. Best example is mild steel. So mild steel is a mixture of iron and carbon. So you have iron and you have carbon. So due to the presence, you will be studying about the reason for why you will be having multiple yield points for mild steel in the subject of material science. So due to the presence of multiple elements, that will be giving rise to multiple yield points. Okay. So basically what you can observe is, initially you will get higher yield point or upper yield point, and suddenly it comes to a lower yield point and goes to peak. So we'll call both them as yield points. So this one is called as upper yield point. This one is called as lower yield point. Upper yield limit and lower yield limits. For example, you take like aluminium. How many elements are there in aluminium? In mild steel, I said there are two elements, iron, carbon, right? In aluminium, how many elements are there? In mild steel, in aluminium, how many elements are there? One element, yes, because aluminium is a single material. Okay, aluminium itself is an element there, so you will not observe multiple yield points there, because the lattice or in a microstructure you will be having only single element. So you will be having single yield point itself. Understand? So mostly you will be observing multiple yield points in the materials where you have alloys. Basically in alloys you will be observing, because mild steel is an alloy. Alloy means what? Basically you will combine two non-reactive. You will combine two non-reactive elements. Okay, so in the matrix of iron, we have added some carbon to alter the properties of iron to make it better. So before mild steel, before the invention of steel and all, so before production of steel and all, so we used to use wrought iron. In the age of Titanic, 1900s, so steel was a very latest material. Just like today, we call carbon fiber is a very latest material. So we talk about Boeing 787 Dreamliner in a very greater extent, because Boeing 787 is the first airplane or commercial airplane which was made up of carbon fiber. So if you take any other aircraft, it is made up of aluminium body. Understand? So for us, carbon fiber is a very new material. So the same way at the time of Titanic, 1900s, etc. So we have steel as a very very costly material or very new type of material. Understood? So the steel is a hybrid version of iron. So because we have added some carbon, and also they have observed different ways the metal is behaving at different values of carbon. That's the reason why we have categories of low carbon steels, medium carbon steels, and high carbon steels. So for low carbon steels, you have different properties. For high carbon steels, you have different properties. And the same way for medium carbon steels, you'll be having different properties. Understand? So those you'll be studying in material science there. So that's the reason why you'll be having multiple yield points for mild steel. So whereas you'll not be having in aluminium. Kindly keep in mind. Till here, everything is clear. Whatever I explained. Any doubt is there, you can ask me. So this is highly conceptual. Okay, and many times they put questions in interviews from this concept only. So this gives rise to a huge and very drastic important concept. Challa Sanjay is asking the question that, sir, why strain hardening and necking are present? Okay, first answer, okay, first basic answer for this thing is, I am not causing strain hardening or I am not causing necking. Here the material is behaving in this way. So material shows the behavior. Understand? So this is something like why glass breaks very easily. Glass is a brittle material, but there is no answer strictly speaking that why glass is a brittle material, right? Understand? That's a natural phenomena. So glass means it will be fragile in nature itself. Clear? In the same way, so materials show the strain hardening and necking phenomena there. Understand? And if you want to have some strong concrete reasons, means we should go into the depth of microstructure. But at this level, what the answer we can give is, the material has already undergone and shown this amount of strain till this point D. So the material becomes stiffer. For example, you take some elastic material and cause some elastic strain. After producing some amount of elastic strain and causing a little amount of plastic strain, you will see it becomes very stiff. That means if whatever the effort you have applied to produce strain from here to here, you have to apply more amount of effort to cause a little bit more amount of elongation. Understood? Sometimes it will break also. Clear? So the material becomes very stiff after this point D. That's the reason why this region is given the name as D2E region is given the name as strain hardening region. So ideally speaking, total area we can call it as strain hardening region itself, because the metal already got hardened or made become stiffer due to the application of or due to the production of strain prior to that. Okay, but in this region it is working or it is showing the necking phenomena or drastic decrease of this area of cross section. That's why we give the name as necking. That's why we give the name as necking region here. I hope you're asking about multiple yield points. Okay, so whenever we are dealing with alloys where multiple elements are there, so there's a probability that you'll be having multiple yield points. Okay, for example, you take aluminum, single element, copper, single element. Okay, so there you will not observe any phenomena of multiple yield points. Clear? Understood? So that's the reason why it's coming up there. Okay, and if you'd like to know so why this you'll get upper yield point first and lower yield point, you should be going into a little bit amount of depth of the metal science subject. So the basic idea, as we have already come up to this level, I'm just giving you the idea here. You can go into the depth of the concept when you are studying manufacturing engineering. Okay, right now I'm just giving you the basic idea so that at some level you will not have any confusion. So what happens is basically you have mild steel with two elements, iron and carbon. So iron will be taking the main positions, lattice positions like this. Again, so this is not my part of subject here. I'm just giving the answer which I have at a basic level. Okay, so these are iron elements, black are iron elements here. So carbon is of less amount. So carbon will be taking interstitial position. So carbon will be taking interstitial position. Kindly remember that we are talking about atoms, not ions. Iron and carbon are not making any bond. Okay, so they are just present, mixture. Mixture means we can separate them or they are not reacting with each other. Okay, so iron and carbon are there. Carbon is taking this position here. So carbon atom size is a little larger than this void size. Okay, but we are forcing the carbon atom to go inside that void or the presence or this volume here. So what happens is, as it was forced to go inside that, it will be giving rise to some force or some reaction forces are there between the iron atoms and carbon atoms. So already some force is there, so you will be getting higher value of yield point. But yielding means start of plastic deformation. Am I right? So yielding means start of plastic deformation, right? Okay. So you will cause some plastic deformation to occur. Permanent change of dimensions. So when you apply load, you will be giving rise to some deformation. Permanent deformation. So when you are giving rise to deformation, so this void size will little bit increase. And that will be sufficient enough to accommodate the carbon atom. That's the reason why once yielding starts, you will achieve lesser value. That means the curve drops. Understood? Clear? This is the basic idea or basic answer you can give at some subject level regarding the multiple yield points of mild steel. Clear? Roshan? Yeah, Manoj Shendre is asking a very, very valid question. He's asking the question that, is this diagram for aluminium? Very good question. Listen here, everyone. This is not the diagram for aluminium, nor for mild steel, nor for any other ductile material. I'm just drawing the ideal curve. Because from ideal behavior, materials give little bit amount of deviation. If you see aluminium, in aluminium curve, or if you see in curve, for copper also, you will not have this horizontal line in the plastic region. The curve will be like this. You will get a curve like this. The curve will be like this. So you will not have horizontal behavior or the zero slope line in the plastic region. So the deviations are there, but whatever is the ductile material, you will observe the plastic behavior. Understood? Okay. So same thing is for copper as well. But in mild steel, as you have multiple elements, so you will be having multiple yield points and the curve is like this. That's why you get this bump, smaller bump here. Sir, which yield point is effective? Challa Sanjay, in ductile materials, as I said already that later we're going to discuss that in ductile materials, we take yield point as strength of the material. Okay. So we have to make sure, first of all, you should not reach any first yield point. Anyways, you have upper yield point first and lower yield point later. So you will not make sure to reach upper yield point at all. After reaching upper yield point, then you will be getting lower yield point, right? And we don't want yielding to happen first of all. So that's a first prior requirement here. So we will make sure stress not to go beyond this value at all. So we'll make sure to go to stresses and strains just below or just before the upper yield point itself. Clear, Challa Sanjay? Manoj Shendre, is it also clear? Okay. If everything is clear, nobody is having doubt, I can go ahead with the one important point regarding ductile materials or any material basically. Fine? Okay. Everybody please pay attention. I have discussed with you people what exactly is the region from 0 to A. It is linear region. The region from 0 to B, elastic region. And I said from C to anywhere it is plastic region. In that we have strain hardening region, we have netting region. But I never commented what is the name of the region between B and C. Yes, in the diagram also I haven't shown any name for that. Right? The reason is, please listen carefully here. In real scenario, A, B, C points. Point A, that is proportionality limit. Point B, that is elastic limit. Point C, that is yield stress. All these 3 points are very near to each other. So in real scenario, you will not have any distinct values between these, distinctive difference between these 3. You'll have single value, that's all. Okay, so that means like, if yield point, that means point A, if you have it as some 100 megapascal, so point B value will be around 100.01 megapascal and point C will be something like 100.03 megapascal. So ideally speaking, that is a sequence in which those 3 points are coming up. But in real scenario, they are very close, so we neglect the difference. So we take single point itself as proportionality limit, the same point as elastic limit, same point as this last yield point as well. Okay, in machine design, we are going to, I hope you people have seen a question as well, where elastic limit value is given, we take the same value to be proportional limit itself. Understand everybody? Clear? So there is no clear distinctive difference between A, B, C. That's the reason why there is no specific name for the region between B and C. Clear? Everyone? Okay? Shall I write on the board? Shall I rub the board and write on the statements? Whatever I explained now? Fine? Okay. So apart from the diagram, whatever I have discussed, I am writing down step by step here. Starting from multiple yield points. Okay, why mild steel is having multiple yield points, why aluminum and aluminum copper are not having, and coming to the region, the points A, B, C coincidence. Okay, all these points I'm writing down. You can copy from the board simultaneously with me.